The actress Jane Fonda was arrested today, accused of smuggling and treason.
They needed a person to do something really terrible, and that was me.
You were photographed behind an aerial gun of the North Vietnamese. What were you doing behind an enemy gun?
People felt very suspicious about my motives.
She's the most despicable woman.
I don't care if she's a famous movie star. That is treason.
They just tried to smear her reputation over and over.
I'm naive and I make mistakes, but it was my fault that I sat there.
I will go to my grave regretting that.
How did it feel to know that the President of the United States was targeting you personally?
And I knew that it was to scare us. We came home. There wasn't a drawer in the house that wasn't pulled out and turned over.
They would have killed her if they could.
Well, when the president does it, it is not illegal.
Jane Fonda fights back against Nixon.
President Nixon has been put on trial for abusing his power.
I consider Jane Fonda one of the most courageous women of our time.
You think I'm going to back down?
What can they do to me now that they haven't already tried?
I will never forget the day I was aware that I was being followed, and there was very little attempt to disguise it. There'd be these guys in trench coats with dark glasses. I was traveling from Canada, and I had a suitcase filled with vitamin pills in little envelopes, and they busted me for drug trafficking. The arresting officer said to me, "I'm working on orders from the White House."
Jane's father, Henry Fonda, warned her that this would happen, but she was desperate to make him proud.
I became an activist because of Dad. He stood up for the underdog, fairness and justice. I wanted to prove to him that I could also stand up for justice. My father could look from the upstairs window and see the leadership of the Black Panther Party going in and out. And he said to me, "I'm going to turn you in." He was a hero to so many people. But these kind of men aren't always good fathers. It's hard to be both.
Her dad had been chasing his Oscar dreams and abandoned Jane in her darkest moment.
I came home from school one day. My father and my grandmother were sitting in the living room, and they sat me down and they said, "Your mother died of a heart attack." My father took me to the Union Station with my suitcase and put me on the train to boarding school. He was newly married. He was in a play on Broadway and making films, and I couldn't continue living at home with him. A year after my mother died, I was in study hall, and a girlfriend passed me a movie magazine in which it said that my mother had cut her throat. I sat on the edge of my bed thinking, what's the matter with me? Why can't I cry? I was floundering. My father called me frivolous and lazy. He didn't realize that I was suffering.
Jane was a talented actor like her father, but she was driven to do more.
I wanted my life to have meaning. There was so much catching up to do about Vietnam and about Native Americans and about what was happening to Black people. How could I have reached the age of 32 in such ignorance? I felt so guilty. All of a sudden become an overnight righteous activist.
People felt very suspicious about my motives. You are a rich movie star. Why do you care? Why are you involving yourself in this?
She dedicated herself to a higher cause, but President Richard Nixon was determined to shut her up.
What in the world is the matter with Jane Fonda? She's a great actress. She looks pretty, but boy, she's often in the wrong track.
Ms. Fonda is quite active in the peace movement, the civil rights field, efforts to aid Mexican Americans, American Indians, and dissident soldiers.
Jane Fonda is reported to be on Nixon's list of enemies, a list of people Nixon is determined to take down.
We came home. There wasn't a drawer in the house that wasn't pulled out and turned over. Everything was torn out of the closets. Papers were rifled. Desks were open. Someone had gone through our house. I knew that it was to scare us.
Jane refused to back down, but when she took her activism overseas, she made a huge mistake.
I didn't quite know what I was doing or how to make proper use of my celebrity. So much had happened so quickly. Nixon was bringing ground troops home, and he was saying that he was ending the war, when in fact it wasn't.
And then in your trip, you were photographed behind an aerial gun of the North Vietnamese.
I will go to my grave regretting that.
What were you doing behind an enemy gun?
I wasn't even thinking what I was doing, and that image went out, and the image makes it look like I was against our soldiers, which was never the case. I had been working with soldiers prior to that and for years after that, and I knew right away that was wrong.
I'm naive and I make mistakes, but it was my fault that I sat there.
Nixon took advantage of Jane's mistake and made her a national target.
They needed a very visible person who represented the peace movement to do something really terrible. And that was me.
Jane Fonda is an outrageous liar. She's a hypocrite and a liar.
She's the most despicable woman.
I don't care if she's a tender young female, a famous movie star. That is treason.
Actress Jane Fonda was arrested today at the airport in Cleveland.
Well, how did it feel to know that the President of the United States was targeting you personally?
He wanted to figure out how they could get me for treason. And so he assigned to the Justice Department to find a way, and they ended up coming back to him and saying, she didn't commit treason. You should focus on somebody who's really a danger. I was exonerated.
Shortly after Jane was proven innocent, Nixon was convicted of abusing his power.
President Nixon stunned the country today by admitting that he held back evidence.
Well, when the president does it, it is not illegal.
President Nixon will announce his resignation tonight.
But it didn't take the target off Jane's back.
One vet spit tobacco juice at me, and it got a lot of headlines. They've spread lies about things that I supposedly did that aren't true, and I'm proud of most of what I did, and I'm very sorry for some of what I did.
Despite everyone turning against her, Jane realized true activism meant putting others' needs before her own.
What the hell do you have to lose? So arrest me already. So I'm gonna be an activist like you've never seen. So what? What can they do to me now that they haven't already tried?
You've been taking your public by surprise recently. From where I am, it looks like a different Jane Fonda.
Oh, I think you're right. I think I am different. To men who were in Vietnam, who I hurt, I owe them an apology. I was trying to help. I was thoughtless and careless about it, and I am very sorry that I hurt them. And I want to apologize to them and to their families. I've gotten many, many letters from Vietnam veterans who indicate that they have healed and that they are forgiving. I wasn't some privileged person. It was full-time, on-the-ground activism.
I consider Jane Fonda one of the most courageous women of our time because she made a conversion from a life that was so sterile and easy to live into a life that's filled with harassments and ridicule and requires real courage.
I've become, a full, whole human being, finally.
Having learned from her mistakes, Jane supported her father for who he was instead of who she wanted him to be.
I wanted to work with him, and we knew he was dying. I saw the play on Golden Pond, and I thought, boy, this is a great part for him that could win him an Oscar. And so I produced it. The parallels were very, very close between the characters and my father and I in real life. I reached out and I touched his arm, and he put his hand up. But I saw the tears in his eyes. And, it meant the world to me.
And the winner is Henry Fonda.
Oh, Dad, I'm so happy and proud for you.
And on his deathbed, she was there for him when he needed her the most.
Sitting by my father's bedside as he was dying. Wouldn't say anything. I wanted him to tell me that he loved me, and I wanted to ask him questions. And I knelt at his feet and looked up at him, and I told him that I loved him, and I knew he'd done the best that he could. I don't know what it meant for him, but I do know that he is with me, and I feel his energy. I feel so lucky.
And after his death, Jane learned how her father truly felt all along.
There was an interview with your father that was done in 1974, and he said, and I quote, "Jane is the best actress I know."
I couldn't be more proud. She's not only this incredible actress, but she's the activist.
You're proud of that part of her?
I'm in awe.
You surprised?
He never told me that. I had no idea that he admired me.
By committing herself to change and standing up for others, Jane found her true purpose.
And I'm glad that I continue to change and grow. When I was young, I thought that activism was a sprint. If I just go fast enough, everything can be fixed really quick. And then I got a little older and I realized that it's really a relay. You pass the baton. You just have to feel in your gut, in your heart, I know who I am. I know that this is the right thing to do.